had the real great fortune to command at Philadelphia, what was then called DSCP, Defense Supply Center Philadelphia, from 2003 to 2005. Prior to that, I was in the Joint Staff, so I was already in a joint environment. And then after that, I was deployed into Iraq and Afghanistan. And in terms of working in a civilian workforce, I had had some experience with that. I also went and talked to a number of former commanders that had commanded DSCP. And each to a person, they talked about this great environment, this great team up in Philadelphia. They said they're a tough group. You got to earn their respect, and that's fair enough. And I hope I did that during my time there. But it was just an incredible leadership experience, and I learned so much. When I arrived in 2003, we had just gone into Iraq the year before. When I was on the Joint Staff, I did a lot of that work. Afghanistan continued on, so we were really building up our capabilities, pushing the enterprise of DLA forward into the battle space. Obviously, big part of DLA is Class 9. But in our case, we were talking about food, which is obviously a basic necessity in a combat environment, and all the different kinds of food that are there. And we were transitioning from MREs to hot chow. And so the team at Philadelphia was really working that day in and day out. There were a lot of uniform issues and equipping issues of the individual soldier, body armor, for example. The medical supplies, the other supply chain at Philadelphia was also very engaged on pushing Class 8 medical supplies forward into the battlefield. So we were primarily focused on making sure that the forces in Iraq had what they needed, and there was a smaller force at that time in Afghanistan, but we didn't want to forget about that and make sure that they were also fully kitted with everything they needed to conduct those operations. BSM, Business Systems Modernization, was DLA's effort to really bring the organization in the 21st century from an IT perspective. Huge SAP product. And it was going to dramatically change how we did our day-to-day processes, our business organization. So it was a huge undertaking. I will tell you, DLA headquarters managed it, in my opinion, expertly. It was tough to do. You had to really have very strict project management, and I think under Admiral Lippert, then the DLA director, and his team up here, they did a super job of that. The other thing they did that I thought was so important, and this has paid me well later on in my career, was you have to have this project management, but you also have to look at the human side, what I call the art of it, and make sure you're bringing in the team. And so they had a BSM roadshow that went around all the different organizations, kind of pumped everybody up, gave them a little view of that. So we spent a lot of time, not only the technical side of it, but really making sure that the users would get comfortable. There's that learning curve. People are somewhat resistant sometimes to change. They like the system they had. My leadership approach, I hope, is focused on people, people first. Mission's always important, absolutely, and there's those give and take of that. I had read The 1 Minute Manager and kind of looked at that, but I felt like I already had the personality for that kind of thing. I spent a lot of time out in the organization, visiting, folks, talking to them, just walking around, management by walking around. And one of the things I learned from a general officer, Jim Wright, who's since passed away, great quartermaster officer I served with in the Pentagon, he used to do a thing, we have these things called see me's, right? Where you'd bring the team into your office, see me. And he kind of had this thing where it was called see you. So he would leave his office, he would go down to the different, staff sections, and I learned that. And so I tried to do that in Philadelphia as well, where I would not have people come to my office. I would go to their workspace, and I would sit with them, and I'd see the pictures of their family, and I would see their hobbies, and we have a little conversation about that, and so you'd have that human touch. And to me, I think that built that relationship, because it was a big organization. It was thousands of people, and I really wanted to understand what were the challenges they were facing. Forward positioning, great initiative again by the DLA headquarters team and then also all the supply chains. It was this term of extending the enterprise deep into the battle space. The challenge, of course, is battles change so frequently. It's a very dynamic environment. you want to have your capabilities as close to that as possible. Those resources, those repair parts, those uniforms, that food that can be moved around the battle space based on what is happening. And so just having position stocks back in CONUS or far away from the battlefield, you want to have those as well. But as much as you can push that forward, that minimizes the time-distance factor so that you can meet the need of the warfighter as rapidly as possible. And it also gives them confidence. They can just look back over their shoulder and they know that the DLA team is pretty close by in case something doesn't quite go as planned. As we all know, plans don't survive first contact with the enemy. So that forward positioning gave the commanders in the field and the leaders in the field flexibility and confidence. The hurricane that hit the Gulf, specifically Louisiana and New Orleans, here we were conducting operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. All of a sudden, we had a domestic, emergency, and so we had to kind of do both at the same time. And all of a sudden, there became a huge requirement, especially for stuff at Philadelphia: food, water, tonnage, all kinds of just basic human needs. So we set up an operations center at that time. We were handling Iraq and Afghanistan through our normal processes, and that was going pretty well. But when we had this new event occurred, and we knew how important it was to the nation, we set up an operations center in the basement there of the headquarters and staffed it with some great young officers and NCOs and some GS workers. And we were able to focus then on Katrina and also do Iraq and Afghanistan. We ended up keeping that operations center in place even after Katrina kind of subsided, and I think that became a lesson learned and a best practice that you have a headquarters that's kind of garrison focused, kind of fixed focus, but this operations center really became the heartbeat of that operation and really kept us in the battle rhythm that much better. As far as I know, there would not been an operations center like that, because we talked about it. Could we take any lessons from a previous time? And really, there was no institutional knowledge. It may have happened, but we couldn't find any institutional knowledge that said this is what it ought to look like. This is the kind of capabilities you need. This is the staffing you need. We kind of built it from scratch. And again, had some great young folks at Philadelphia, and some not so young, making that happen.